You want to know what makes loners dangerous to society? It's not that they're antisocial or broken or incapable of connection. It's that they've discovered something most people spend their entire lives running from, that they don't need constant external validation to feel whole. And that discovery terrifies everyone who's still trapped in the performance. First, they're comfortable with silence. Not just tolerating it, not enduring it until someone fills the space, genuinely comfortable. Watch what happens when a loner sits in silence during a group conversation. The discomfort radiates from everyone else. People start filling the space with nervous chatter, asking if everything's okay, making jokes about the awkwardness. Because most people experience silence as a void that needs filling, a problem that needs solving, a social failure that needs correcting. They've been trained to fear the absence of noise, to interpret quiet as evidence that something's wrong. The loner sitting peacefully in that silence, unbothered by the absence of conversation, not scrambling to fill the space, that's threatening. Because it reveals that the constant chatter most people engage in isn't connection, it's anxiety management. It's filling space to avoid confronting what exists in the silence. And when someone demonstrates they don't need that constant stimulation, don't fear that void, can actually rest in the quiet, it exposes everyone else's dependence on noise. Here's what psychology reveals about this. Silence forces people to confront their own thoughts, their own internal state, their own sense of self without external distraction. Most people find this unbearable. Studies on solitary reflection show that people would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. That's not an exaggeration, that's actual research. The loner's comfort with silence demonstrates a psychological resilience that most people lack, the ability to be with themselves without distraction, without external input constantly validating their existence. This is power. Not power over others, but power within yourself. The power to not need constant external stimulation to feel okay. And that power is deeply threatening to a society built on keeping people dependent on external validation, external entertainment, external connection. When you're comfortable in silence, you can't be controlled through the threat of isolation. You can't be manipulated through the promise of inclusion. You can't be managed through social pressure. Your comfort with silence makes you ungovernable. Second, they make decisions without consensus. They don't poll the group. They don't need everyone's input. They don't require social validation before taking action. They assess the situation, make a decision, and move forward. Watch how this plays out in group settings. Someone proposes an idea. The group immediately starts discussing, debating, seeking consensus. The loner evaluates it independently, decides whether it works for them, and either commits or declines. No committee required. This creates massive discomfort in group-oriented people, because for them, decision-making is inherently social. It's a process of negotiation, of gathering input, of achieving agreement, of ensuring everyone feels heard and included. The loner bypassing that entire process feels like a violation of social contract. It feels disrespectful, dismissive, even arrogant. But here's what's actually happening. The loner isn't rejecting the group's input, they're simply not requiring it. They're demonstrating that they have sufficient internal resources to make sound decisions without external validation. And this terrifies consensus-driven people because it exposes something they don't want to see, that much of what they call collaboration is actually outsourcing of responsibility. When you make decisions by committee, when you require group consensus, when you need everyone's input before taking action, you're distributing accountability. If the decision fails, it's not your fault. Everyone agreed. Everyone had input. The group is responsible. But when you make decisions independently, you own the outcome. The loner's willingness to make decisions without consensus isn't arrogance, it's courage. It's the psychological strength to trust your own judgment and accept the consequences. It's the refusal to hide behind group agreement. And that level of personal accountability is threatening to people who've built their entire decision-making process around avoiding individual responsibility. The loner's independence in decision-making reveals that all the consultation, all the group discussion, all the consensus-seeking that others engage in isn't about making better decisions, it's about diffusing blame. Third, they don't perform their life for external validation. No constant social media updates, no need to document every experience, no requirement that others witness their activities for those activities to feel meaningful. They do things because they want to do them, and whether anyone knows about it is irrelevant. This is profoundly destabilizing to a culture built on performance and documentation, because in that culture, an experience that isn't shared is an experience wasted. A meal that isn't photographed doesn't count. A vacation that isn't posted might as well not have happened. An achievement that isn't announced loses its value. The loner doing meaningful things, having rich experiences, achieving personal goals, all without broadcasting them for external validation, breaks the entire system. It demonstrates that meaning can be intrinsic, that satisfaction doesn't require witnesses, that your life can be full and rich and deeply meaningful even if no one else knows about it or validates it or acknowledges it. Here's why this threatens people. Because it exposes the emptiness of their own performance. When someone is constantly posting, constantly updating, constantly seeking external validation through documentation, they've made their sense of self dependent on others' responses. The likes, the comments, the engagement, that's not connection, that's metric-based self-worth. They need the audience to feel like their life matters. The loner, living richly without that audience, proves the audience was never necessary. And for someone who's built their entire sense of meaning around external validation, that realization is existentially threatening. If you can have a meaningful life without anyone witnessing it, then what have they been doing? What have they been performing for? What have they been measuring? The loner's private satisfaction threatens their public performance. So they pathologize it. They call it secretive, closed off, antisocial. They frame the loner's privacy as dysfunction to avoid confronting that their own constant publicity might be the actual problem. Fourth, they refuse to maintain relationships out of obligation. They don't stay friends with people they've outgrown. They don't maintain connections just because of shared history. They don't force themselves to care about people they don't actually connect with anymore. If a relationship is draining, if a friendship has run its course, if a connection no longer serves anyone, they let it go. No guilt, no extended explanations, no dramatic exits. Just a quiet withdrawal from something that stopped working. This is treated as socially unacceptable, borderline cruel evidence of deep character flaws. Because most people are trapped in relationship prison, maintaining friendships they don't enjoy out of obligation, staying connected to people who drain them because we've been friends for so long, forcing themselves to care because ending a relationship feels like failure. The loner's willingness to let relationships end naturally, without guilt or obligation, without forcing connection that isn't there, that's liberation. And it's threatening. Because if you can let relationships end without treating it as catastrophic failure, then what's the real value of all those obligatory friendships others are maintaining? If you can be okay saying, this relationship served us for a season and that season has ended, then what does that mean for the person desperately clinging to friendships that stopped being meaningful years ago? The loner's ability to release relationships without guilt exposes that much of what passes for loyalty is actually fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being seen as a bad friend, fear of admitting that the connection is dead, but they're too afraid to let it go. The loner saying, "I'm okay letting this end," reveals that the person clinging to dead friendships isn't being loyal, they're being afraid. And having your fear exposed as the motivation for your behavior, rather than love or care or genuine connection, is intolerable. So they reframe the loner's healthy boundary setting as coldness, as inability to maintain long-term relationships, as evidence they don't know how to really care about people. It's easier to pathologize the loner than to examine their own fear-based relationship maintenance. Fifth, they find fulfillment in activities that don't require an audience. Reading, creating, thinking, exploring ideas, working on projects that matter to them, all done in solitude, with no one watching, no one validating, no one even knowing. This is incomprehensible to people who derive their sense of accomplishment from external recognition. For them, achievement requires witnesses. Success requires acknowledgement. Effort requires praise. The loner spending hours on a personal project that no one will ever see, finding deep satisfaction in the process itself rather than in others' responses to the product, that's alien. It suggests a source of fulfillment they don't have access to, an internal validation system they've never developed, a capacity for self-directed meaning-making that they've outsourced to others. Here's what makes this particularly threatening. It reveals the fragility of externally derived satisfaction. When your sense of accomplishment depends entirely on others' recognition, you're perpetually vulnerable. Your achievements only count if others acknowledge them. Your efforts only matter if others praise them. Your worth is constantly up for negotiation based on others' responses. The loner who finds genuine fulfillment in solitary activities, who derives satisfaction from the process rather than the recognition, who creates meaning through internal validation rather than external acknowledgement, they've achieved a kind of psychological independence that most people can't access. They're not vulnerable to the withdrawal of external validation because they never needed it in the first place. This is power. Real power. Not power over others, but freedom from others' power over you. And when someone demonstrates that level of independence, it exposes everyone else's dependence. It reveals that all the achievement broadcasting, all the success performing, all the validation seeking isn't confidence, it's need. It's psychological dependence dressed up as ambition. Sixth, they set boundaries without guilt or extensive explanation. When they say no, it's clean. I can't make it. That doesn't work for me. I need to pass on this one. No elaborate justifications, no apologetic explanations, no guilt-laden excuses about why they can't do the thing they don't want to do. Just a clear, calm boundary. This is treated as rudeness, as coldness, as evidence they don't care about people's feelings. Because in most social systems, saying no requires extensive explanation. You have to justify your boundary, prove it's legitimate, demonstrate that you have sufficient reason to decline. The assumption is that wanting to say no isn't reason enough. You need external justification. You need to prove your boundary is valid. The loner refusing to participate in this justification dance, refusing to apologize for boundaries, refusing to package their no in enough explanation and guilt to make it palatable, that's threatening, because it exposes that the expectation of explanation isn't about understanding, it's about maintaining the option to argue. When you extensively explain why you're saying no, you're opening negotiation. You're providing information that can be challenged, circumstances that can be reframed, justifications that can be dismissed. The loner's clean boundary, "No, that doesn't work for me," closes negotiation. It doesn't provide ammunition for counterargument. It doesn't invite debate. It's simply information. This is my boundary. And people hate this because it removes their ability to pressure, to guilt, to manipulate. The extensive explanation isn't actually needed for understanding, it's needed for control. It gives others leverage to change your mind, to make you feel guilty, to frame your boundary as unreasonable. The loner refusing to provide that leverage, refusing to justify boundaries that don't require justification, refusing to feel guilty for having needs and limits, that's power. And it's threatening to everyone who's built their influence on guilt-based manipulation. When you can't be guilted into changing your boundary, when you can't be pressured through emotional manipulation, when your no is actually final, you're ungovernable. And ungovernable people are dangerous to systems built on compliance through guilt. 7th, they're content with their own company for extended periods, not just tolerating solitude between social events, not just surviving alone until the next interaction, actually preferring extended periods of solitude, finding them restorative and fulfilling, emerging from them energized rather than depleted. This is pathologized immediately because the dominant cultural narrative is that humans need regular social contact to be psychologically healthy, that extended solitude is inherently dangerous, that preference for your own company is a red flag for mental health issues. The loner who spends a week alone and comes out genuinely happy, genuinely rested, genuinely fulfilled, they're breaking the model. They're demonstrating that the constant social engagement others exhaust themselves maintaining isn't actually necessary for well-being, that you can be psychologically healthy, emotionally stable, deeply satisfied with extended periods of solitude. This is treated as impossible, as denial, as evidence the person doesn't understand their own dysfunction. But here's what research actually shows. People with strong internal resources, who have rich inner lives, who can self-soothe and find meaning in solitary activities, consistently report equal or higher well-being compared to highly social people. The preference for extended solitude isn't pathology. It's a different psychological configuration, one that threatens the social structures built on the assumption that everyone needs constant connection. Because if you don't need regular social contact to be okay, then the social obligations, the mandatory team bonding, the family expectations, the friendship maintenance requirements, all of that becomes optional. And if it's optional, then what happens to all the systems built on it being mandatory? The loner's contentment in extended solitude threatens workplace culture that demands constant collaboration. It threatens family systems built on regular contact as proof of care. It threatens friendships that require constant engagement as evidence of commitment. It threatens the entire social order that uses the threat of isolation as a compliance mechanism. When you're genuinely okay alone for extended periods, you can't be controlled through the fear of being alone, and that makes you dangerous. 8th, they observe rather than perform in social situations. When they do attend social gatherings, they're often watching, listening, taking things in rather than performing engagement. They're not working the room, not performing enthusiasm, not maintaining constant conversation. They're present but quietly, observing rather than participating in the social performance. This makes people deeply uncomfortable. The person quietly observing in the corner becomes a source of anxiety. Are they judging us? Why aren't they engaging? Do they think they're better than everyone here? 9th, they've developed a strong sense of self independent of social feedback. They know who they are not through others' reflections, but through internal clarity. Their sense of worth isn't determined by social status, by how many people want to be around them, by whether they're included or excluded. They've built identity from the inside out rather than letting it be constructed by external validation. This is the deepest threat, because it represents complete independence from the social control system. When your sense of self is constructed through social feedback, you're perpetually manageable. You can be controlled through inclusion and exclusion. You can be manipulated through acceptance and rejection. You'll modify yourself to maintain approval. But the loner with a strong internal sense of self, who knows who they are regardless of social feedback, they're unmanageable. You can't control them through the threat of exclusion, because exclusion doesn't threaten their sense of self. The research is clear. Internal locus of identity is associated with higher psychological resilience, lower anxiety, greater life satisfaction, and stronger sense of purpose. But this research is buried because it threatens every system built on keeping people dependent on external validation. The loner's internal sense of self represents the ultimate freedom, freedom from needing others to tell you who you are. So if you're someone who's comfortable in silence, who makes decisions independently, who doesn't perform your life for validation, who refuses obligation-based relationships, who finds fulfillment without an audience, who sets boundaries without guilt, who's content in extended solitude, who observes rather than performs, who knows yourself from the inside out, society will fear you. Not because you're dangerous to people, because you're dangerous to the systems that control people. You've discovered that you don't need their permission, their validation, their approval, or their inclusion to be whole. And that discovery, lived quietly but undeniably, threatens everything built on keeping people dependent. They'll call it dysfunction, it's freedom. They'll call it concerning, it's power. They'll call it pathology, it's liberation. Stay dangerous.